Hi, and welcome to this latest conversation video. Today, I'm joined by Charlène Gisèle. Charlène is a former high-flying litigation lawyer, but she's now a high-performance health, well-being and business coach. And we're going to have a conversation today talking about sustainable high performance for lawyers and professionals. So something so important to all of us. So Charlène, thank you so much for agreeing to join me and have a chat today.
Thank you so much, Adam. It's a pleasure and honor for me to be here today.
Charlène, I first came across you at a biohacking conference that I was tuning into and saw you give a talk out in Finland. But tell us about your journey from being a litigation lawyer to the role you do now in terms of being a business, health and well-being coach working with executives and lawyers.
Absolutely. Thanks for asking. Well, this will take a little bit of storytelling. I grew up wanting to be a lawyer from as far back as I can remember. My dad was an insurance broker. He was very successful and I used to play in his office and I just wanted to be everything that he was, you know, walking around in suit, being business orientated, being successful. So I started my journey into law very young. I went to law school quite young, graduated from law school, did a double degree. I was extremely keen, couldn't wait to get my training contract, got a job at my dream law firm, in fact, in the city. And I was so pleased to start to be a litigator. I think I was so excited that I perhaps threw myself into it a bit too much. And I didn't set the right boundaries. I overworked a lot and that lasted for a few years. I had a fantastic time and I had phenomenal colleagues, but I was taking a lot of things personally. I was getting really emotionally involved with my files. I was suffering from insomnia. I was quite anxious at the time. And as much as I loved the core work and I loved being a lawyer, I thought, I might step away from being a fee earner and work in legal tech, just to be still in the legal industry, but having perhaps a more manageable work-life balance. So I did that for a few years and I was working as an innovation manager. And that's really where the idea of working with lawyers in a different sales capacity came about. I loved being in the role as selling new products to lawyer. I realized I was quite good at it. And I had this entrepreneurial itch that I wanted to scratch. My dad was an entrepreneur and I wanted to set up something on my own. My dad then had a heart attack and a stroke due to burnout. And the fact that he was my hero and I saw him fall down really, really was a shock. And it was a catalyst for me to change and to just jump ship completely and set sail, went on the world tour, decided to heal myself because I had a bit of a breakdown at that point, and also to become the coach that I wish so many other lawyers had, that I wish my dad had, that I wish so many people that suffer in the city had. So I thought there is a bridge that could be crossed between wellness and the corporate world. And the reason I felt so strongly about it is I rejected the wellness solution as too fluffy. I thought, because I had my lawyer brain, I'm very academic and very analytical. If someone came to me talking about, you know, chakras, or I just rejected it because I thought it was too fluffy. It was a bit woo-woo, a bit off the wall. And I thought, surely there must be something more tangible, more neuroscientific, more scientifically based and led that I could follow and focus on, whereby I could optimize my health, but also come to the city and offer those solutions and show that they work and they can be implemented in a corporate context. So it's a long way around, but the years of working as a litigator and then working in tech and in innovation and a bit of sales and being an entrepreneur, all mixed in, turned me into who I am today.
No, thanks, Charlène. I think a lot of us can resonate with what you say, because I'm sure I know I resonate with it. And I know a lot of my audience, perhaps being a very driven person as a lawyer, also really being affected by the cases you do. You know, a lot of my audience is involved in sort of human rights work and dealing with accounts of severe trauma and the impact that that puts on you. And then, you know, the challenge of burnout, particularly with what we've all gone through globally over the last 2 years. What are the sort of main issues and challenges you see people who come for your help, to you for help? So lawyers, professionals who come to you, what are the main challenges they're facing?
That's such a great question. And the first one is chronic anxiety and this state of panic attack and the shame and guilt that comes with it. So I typically work with very accomplished senior partners, lawyers, executive. And because of the pressure, because of the role, because of the mask they have to put on, they often feel a bit ashamed about not being able to function optimally because they're leading a team, because they are leaders, because they are partners. So it can be a very lonely place to be when you don't want your team or even the law firm you work with to perceive you as a weak link because you're having a bit of mental breakdown. And particularly in law, brain being what we use to do what we do. This is, how we do what we do. For an artist, it will be the hands. For an athlete, it will be the legs. But for us, it's our brain, our intellectual capacity. So anything that affects our brain, our mental health, is therefore quite taboo because it is still perceived as something that could impact our capacity to perform and our ability to deal with the clients in the best possible way. So there is a lot of shame still in the city and outside the city, in the legal industry at large, around speaking out when it comes to mental health. So then what happens is what I call external soothers. Because people feel embarrassed, ashamed, or guilty, they will resort to perhaps a lot of coffees or stimulants to stay up, and then perhaps even sleeping pill to go to sleep, or even medication for attention deficit disorder. I've seen people taking medication that they didn't even medically need, just so that they would be more performant at work. I've seen a lot of people either skip meals or eat more as an external soother. So when you notice that behaviors are starting to change and the person is actually being affected by these external changes and trying to compensate the stress and anxiety by grabbing on to external things, that's a red flag. Then if you fast forward a few years, that's what I call the life event, the life crisis. And sadly, that's often the point where clients contact me when something has gone significantly wrong. So it will be either in the form of a medical diagnosis. So that could have been a burnout, or that could have been a breakdown, or it could have been a stroke. I had clients suffer from mini stroke, heart attacks, cardiovascular risk. And then they realize, okay, what I'm doing is not sustainable. I need to take action. What's interesting is post-pandemic, I've seen more and more clients being proactive, thinking, ooh, I feel early signs. I'm not doing that great. It's not catastrophic yet, but I feel that I could, mitigate where it could go. And they see me proactively, which is really a beautiful and encouraging shift. But there is still a vast majority of people that wait for that life event, as I did, to take action.
That's so helpful. For those of us who work in these high pressure environments, I think there still is that stigma about the mental health. And perhaps one of the good things to come out of the pandemic is that people are now okay with saying they're not okay, so they can be open a bit more. But what are some things we can do to avoid the sort of cliff edge, to avoid the burnout, to avoid these life events that you've talked about?
That's a really great question. What I've noticed to be the case is how important the correlation is between mental health and metabolic health. Oftentimes, we tend to go straight for the mental health, and a lot of doctors will prescribe antidepressants, so on and so forth, instead of looking at, right, what could we do at a metabolic standpoint? What if we looked at the person holistically and look at how they look after their physiological needs? 80% of the time, mental health is coming or deriving as a side effect of an underlying suboptimal metabolic function. So for instance, if someone is working in the office as a lawyer, as a barrister, as a solicitor, and spending countless hours at the screen with a bad posture, eating in a way that is not serving them, perhaps snacking on high carbs, high sugar, high carbonated drinks, and also high alcohol. That is something that we must address, because in the legal industry, we quite like to have our fancy dinners with clients. And although with the pandemic, there's been less of that, there's been more and more Zoom drinking happening, and also lonely drinking happening. So a lot of my clients have noticed drinking more because they were alone. So those factors can really impact our metabolic health negatively, meaning the way our organs function. And then in turns, because we're feeling depleted, our energy is lower, our vitality is lower, then our mental health can be affected.
No, that's so helpful and just so insightful about how the pandemic has impacted people in various ways and how that physical issue is impacting their mental health. We're recording this at the start of 2022. A lot of people at New Year look to implement new habits and practices. I know we're perhaps hardcore biohackers who are into sort of cryotherapy and red lights and all different things, but just for the average person watching, what are some practical health and wellness habits that people can implement? Actually, I thought you'd enjoy this. Just before we came on, I listened to somebody give this quote. They said this: habits are the compound interest of self-improvement. And I thought that was fantastic, that these compounding habits, positive ones that we can now start to implement. So Charlène, what are the sort of positive habits that we can implement?
I love that you said this, and it made me smile. And if I may, just before I answer your question, just to loop into what you've just said, because it was such a beautiful quote. It reminded me of James Clear's Atomic Habits.
James Clear, it's from Atomic Habits. There you are.
And there is one as well from him whereby it says that when in time of stress, we don't rise to our goals, we fall back to our habits. And forgive me if I haven't quoted word for word, it's out of the top of my head. But the reason it's so beautiful and so important that you've mentioned that as well is what we need to optimize is our habit. Because yes, we can set goals for 2022. Yes, we can set intentions and have resolution, and by all means we should. However, when stressed and the workload is picking up and we're under a lot of pressures as lawyers, as fee earners, solicitors, barristers, the reality is we're going to go down to our habits. So those habits are the things that we need to optimize. And when do we know something is a habit? When we don't need to think about it to do it. It's almost like an autopilot. And this it's a learned skill. It's not something we're born with, it's something that we learn. So one of the habits we could start optimizing, to answer your question, is that of walking more. One of the most damaging impact of the pandemic has been the fact that people stay at home. I worked with one of my clients. I will call him James for the purpose of this YouTube video, although his name is not James, just to keep confidentiality. And we were working together and we were on a Zoom call, and he was really having a tough day. And we were doing an inventory of his days, his workload. And I just asked James, when is the last time you went outside? Outside, just outside your flat. He lived in a very beautiful apartment with the beautiful setup, great computer. And he paused. He had to really seriously think about it. He did not know when was the last time he stepped out of his apartment, because James was getting food delivered. He was getting all his work by email. He was doing all his phone call by Zoom. He was getting food at night. He had on-demand shopping. Everything was provided. He hadn't stepped out of his apartment, in fact, in over 4 days. Now, it may sound shocking, but it's quite easy to happen. So we need to go outside, we need to walk, and the best way to do it is to track it. And this might be a bit provocative to say so, but don't trust yourself. Don't rely on your willpower. I've been a health coach for many years now, and I still track my daily steps because I know that my nature as a human being is to be lazy and to save energy, because that for many years, million years ago, meant survival or death, because energy was vital and we were trying to save it. So if we look at how we were genetically programmed, we were programmed to save our energy. So it is only natural, please, anyone listening, don't feel guilty or ashamed if you too haven't walked or haven't moved in a few days. That is something that our body is going to do to store energy. But we're no longer in times where we have to fear great predators and we need to save our energy. We have plenty of food. So let's go and spend that energy. Let's go and track our steps and gamify it. That's something that I want to say. Have fun. So for instance, if you look at your smartphone, anyone listening, I would love to invite you to just have a little look at your step count and set a little target, right? Let's go easy. We're not going to go all the way to 10,000 steps a day overnight. If your current step count is, say, 2,000, why not just aim to double it for next week consistently? Every day, you just set a target. Every day next week, I'm going to walk for at least 4,000 steps or at least 1 hour, whether you count it in steps or in time, but making sure you're going outside. And then I hear a lot about, it's cold outside. We live in the UK, or it's winter time. But that builds resilience. Being a little cool, being out in nature, breathing a bit of fresh air is excellent for us. It's good for our cognitive function, but it's also good for creativity. And it's good for thinking in a way that is going to help us resolve problems, which is excellent for litigators or barristers. There's been plenty of data from scientists and neuroscientists that show that time in nature exposure is excellent for cognitive function. Nature has the ability to lower our heart rate down, to activate our parasympathetic nervous system, and to just naturally calm us down. So if you listen to this today, make a commitment to go outside.
No, that's really practical. And I love the fact that it's both practical and doable, because we sometimes it seems goals seem too far and we fail and give up so quickly, but that's that practical and doable goal. Just before we finish, any tips on you've mentioned nutrition earlier on, and sort of what people put inside their bodies in terms of eating and drinking, and anything you'd recommend there?
Such a beautiful question. I think it's important to perhaps be very wary of this over snacking culture that a lot of us have, and that is slightly encouraged in the corporate world, I have to say, with all those vending machine and those birthday cakes. Now, I know most of us are working from home or in a sort of hybrid capacity, but I still see a lot of people snacking in random moments of the day, and perhaps just inviting a bit of conscious eating, meaning, really preparing a meal with care and love and being attentive and being present. Again, just referring back to one of my clients, he was consuming all his meal while on email to save time. Now, that does not save time. It's a bit counterintuitive to take time to eat, because I understand that you want to save time. I've done this many years as well, so I really sympathize. But actually what you do is you do both at a mediocre level. You don't digest your food very well because you're not conscious of what you're eating, but you also don't do your work very well because you're not giving it your full attention. So instead of doing two things at a mediocre level, how about doing two things at outstanding level and just making sure that you segment your time? So anyone that's listening, if you have a meal coming up, please prepare that meal mindfully and eat that meal mindfully. Just look at the food, chew the food slowly, and if you can, try to avoid any of this really industrial processed food. I think the golden rule is quite simple, without wanting to be too dogmatic or without saying be this or be that in terms of eating. The bottom line is, has it been overly processed? Does it contain ingredients that you cannot even pronounce? Not because you're French, just because you can't pronounce them. That should be an indicator that perhaps it's not really meant for human consumption. Is it so readily available and convenient that it has a huge shelf life. Again, that's a bit of a red flag. Really long, huge shelf lives are a bit of a red flag because they will be filled with preservatives and colorants. So as much as possible, whenever consuming food, try to get close to the source. And now I know that when talking to busy professionals, the comeback is, but I don't have time. I don't have time to cook. I don't have time to get natural food. I hear that. And I have a little secret hack for this is batch cooking. I do my meal in really large portions and I freeze a lot of it. I use slow cooker, I use air fryer, and I just make several meals at a time. Then I freeze it, I put it in small portions, and I have few meals ahead planned in advance. Your health really, really can benefit from eating properly and making sure you cut down on sugar.
Charlène, that's so helpful. Thank you very much. And I'd encourage people actually do connect with Charlène on LinkedIn, because recently I know you posted 12 natural health hacks for 2022, and I've been reading through them, and there's some really fantastic practical tips there. So I'd encourage you, you've heard a few in our discussion today, but go away, connect with Charlène, and you'll be able to see some more of those. If people are interested in knowing more about your work or working with you, or just looking online at some of the stuff you do, what do you offer, and how do people connect with you?
Thanks for asking, Adam. LinkedIn is a great place to find me, Charlène Gisèle, or my website as well, www.charlenegisele.com. And I would be delighted to offer anyone that's listened to this recording a guided ebook or guided meditation to start and to take a little step, a little action towards optimizing their health for 2022. So you can just send me a message and say, you've listened to this recording, and I'll be sure to send you little gifts to say thank you for listening.
That's really helpful. And I'll put all the links to Charlène's social and to her website below this video in the description. And Charlène, just if people want to know about the sort of programs you offer, what sort of programs do you do with lawyers and executives?
Sure, that's a great question. I offer a burnout prevention and bounce back from burnout program. So it's a minimum of 3 months. Most often my clients stay for 6 to 9 months. And it's really looking at the different aspects of our health, both mental health, but also physiological, metabolic health. And it's a program that takes the worker into consideration, meaning I know how important career is. And all my clients really want to thrive, really want to take their career to the next level. So it's nothing that's going to require any awkward downward facing dog in front of your colleagues or any impossible to achieve yoga position. It's all about taking very corporate friendly steps that will optimize your mental health, your emotional landscape, releasing a lot of negative emotion as well, which is very important. And having a cheerleader, having someone on your team. A lot of the time, although people have beautiful families and extraordinary colleagues, there is still that feeling of being misunderstood or being alone or being lonely in the pain that they're going through, whether physical or mental. And working with a professional is often what the difference that makes a difference in terms of being heard, being seen, and knowing that you have someone who can offer you counseling and that is neutral.
Charlène, that's great. And I'd encourage people to follow up, connect with Charlène and see how she can help you. I think it's so good to have somebody who's been in the trenches, knows the sort of pressures as lawyers we're going through, and can offer those practical solutions and habits that we can put in place. So Charlène, thank you so much for talking to me today. It's been fantastic.
Thank you so much, Adam. Thank you for all your beautiful questions. It was a delight.
Thank you.